started shortly. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good night I bid to everyone. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man wala. Tonight we are very grateful and we are very happy to receive one scholar from Turkey, which is Professor Tahir Uluc, which will be delivering his lecture on Suhrawardī's criticism of Ibn Sīnā. This topic that he is going to talk about is a very important topic because it deals with two of important, most influential philosophers in the Islamic history, which is Ibn Sīnā and also Suhrawardī. Professor Tahir Uluc is not only an expert on Ibn Sīnā and also Suhrawardī, but also on Islamic philosophy in general. He is currently the professor at Necmettin Erbakan University, if I'm not mistaken, and also he is also affiliated with Ibn Khaldun University, currently teaching Islamic philosophy. Well, I believe that everyone is eagerly waiting for his lecture to commence, and I need to remind everyone that during the session, please mute your microphone and please do not interrupt the session with any unintended opening of your microphone. And if you have any questions, we will be opening Q&A session after the lecture by Professor Tahir Uluc. So please, you can discuss with him, you can ask him questions relevant to our topic, and also you will be given ample time to also maybe share your experience on reading Ibn Sīnā and also Suhrawardī, inshallah. So, Professor Tahir Uluc, you are warmly welcome to open the lecture, inshallah.
Thank you, Shuaib. It is my pleasure and it is my honor to be here and to meet you here. And it is one of the manifestations of the blessings of globalism, because we can interact with each other, though we are on different sides of the globe, the world. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Tahir Uluc. I am from Turkey, Necmettin Erbakan University in Konya. As you may know, Necmettin Erbakan is one of Turkey's ex-prime ministers who passed away like a couple of years ago. And Konya is Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi's city in central Anatolia. I think you heard about Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi, who is the author of Masnavi, the famous poem. I am in Islamic philosophy department, and I've been in Konya for the last 30 years. I did my undergraduate and graduate studies, all of them in Konya. I spent some time in America, in the United States of America, as well as in Iran, studying Islamic philosophy and Sufism. I studied Ibn Arabi's mystical symbolism in my PhD studies, and then I studied Suhrawardī's criticism or critique of Ibn Sīnā. And in Turkey, we have, after the PhD level, to become an associate professor, we need to write a monograph, a book like PhD. So I studied Suhrawardī's critique of Ibn Sīnā like a second, PhD in Turkey's academic promotion system. And then to become a full professor, we need to write another book or another monograph. Of course, in addition to the conference papers, presentations, and articles, journal articles. An academic, if he wants or she wants to get promoted to full professorship, he needs to write a book, a monograph. So I wrote a monograph on Imam Maturidi, the founder of the Maturidi School of Islamic Theology. his critique of the philosophers. Before starting and proceeding to talk about Suhrawardi's critique of Ibn Sina, I would like to talk about my general project, which I have been busy with in the last 6-7 years, because I think that there is a strong relationship between these three major trends of Islamic intellectual tradition, which are theology, kalam, Sufism, tasawwuf or irfan, and philosophy itself. Excuse me. So this means that if somebody wants to better understand and appreciate theology, he needs to have studied Islamic philosophy. If somebody wants to understand the classical Islamic theological texts, well, he needs to know about also Islamic philosophy, because of course there's an interaction between Islamic philosophy, Islamic theology, and Islamic mysticism, Sufism, irfan, but the extent and amount of the influence of Islamic philosophy or the philosophers, Muslim philosophers, on other thinkers like theologians and Sufis is, I think, higher than vice versa. So philosophy is like the source. If somebody studies philosophy well, and if he gets well versed in Islamic philosophy, he will understand the text and problems of theology and Sufism far better. That's why in Turkey, we have a very, new, in fact, publisher, Ketebe publisher. They published a lot of books, as well as, İnsan Yayınları, another publisher. So I would like to talk about my project, so it will be better appreciated, what I am doing will be better appreciated. These two volumes, Ibn Sina's Al-İşarat ve Tembihat. As you know, Ibn Sina's İşarat ve Tembihat is Ibn Sina's most recent work on philosophy. One of his most mature books. And the philosophical activities after Ibn Sina has been conducted through this book. Students, they studied philosophy through this book. And many commentaries have been written on this book. But this book is Ibn Sina's Al-İşarat ve Tembihat. Very difficult to understand. So it's like cipher, like cipher or puzzle. He's saying something and then he's referring to a zamir, to a pronoun 2 pages earlier. So how can you know that? So there have been written many commentaries on this, and there's an Iranian scholar, his name is Hassan Malikshahi. He was one of the professors of Tehran University philosophy department, and he says that in the introduction he studied Al-İşarat ve Tembihat many years, and then he taught Al-İşarat ve Tembihat for 25 years during his MA and PhD studies, sessions, not studies, teachings, and then he wrote this 2-volume book. And this is in Persian, actually. First, he is translating the main text of Al-İşarat into Persian, and then he is explaining and commentating on the text in Persian also. So in 2007, I went to Iran. I studied there for a couple of months. I made Persian. I met their professors. I know their scholars. I knew their, professors, and got this book when I was there, and I studied. And then I saw a huge gap and need for such a study for our students who are studying Islamic philosophy, either in MA or PhD or postdoctoral level Islamic philosophy. This book is very, very useful. If somebody reads this 2-volume book, in Turkish, of course its original is Arabic and Persian, but I translated it.
Prof, currently you are muted.
Who did this?
Yeah. Yeah, it's technical problem there. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So, if somebody wants to understand what Islamic philosophy is from the first, hand sources, this is a very good, book. And in Iran, when I was there, this book was published, I think, 10 times, something like this. It was printed 10 times. So even Iranian students, they also like this book. And, as you know, Islamic philosophy has two major trends, two major schools. This is Ibn Sina and Meshai, and this is Al-Isharat wa Tanbihat, together with its commentary. The second school, as you know, is Suhrawardi's Ishraqiyya, Illuminationism. So I translated this book in 2009 first, and then 2 years ago I translated this. As you know, there are two major commentaries on Suhrawardi's Hikmatul Ishraq. Hikmatul Ishraq is Suhrawardi's, as we see, a couple of minutes later when we start talking about Suhrawardi's critique of Ibn Sina, we will see. This is Suhrawardi's magnum opus, Hikmatul Ishraq, and there are two major commentaries on this. One is by Shamseddin Shahrazuri, the other one is Qutbuddin Shirazi. Both are commentaries, Sharh Hikmatul Ishraq. And Shamseddin Shahrazuri's is the earliest one. So I translated this again with its commentary into Turkish. So Ibn Sina and then Suhrawardi's Hikmatul Ishraq translation together with its commentary. And then, there is another book. This one is Ghulam Hussein Ibrahimi Dinani. He is a major Iranian scholar on Islamic philosophy, and this is introduction into İşrakiyye, Macerayı Şuayı Endişe ve Şuhud der Felsefe-i Suhrawardi. I also translated this one into Turkish too. And then, there is Ibn Sina, there is Shihabeddin Suhrawardi. We also have theology and the relationship between philosophy and religion. So we have Imam Maturidi is, as you know, Turks are mostly Hanafi Maturidis. In Aqidah, Turks are followers of Imam Maturidi. So I translated Imam Maturidi's magnum opus, Kitab al-Tawhid, into Turkish. I also translated it into English. Inshallah, it will come out soon. And I wrote a monograph on Imam Maturidi's critique of the philosophers on the ontological nature of the world, which means the disputations over the hudus or qadam of alam. Yani either the world is pre-eternal or it is created in time. And then, as you know, Ibn Sina, Suhrawardi, Maturidi, I also translated Ghazali's Tahafutul Felasife into Turkish. In fact, we already have a couple of translations, but I saw there are some obscurities and misunderstandings and mistranslations in the present Turkish translations. So I translated Ghazali's Tahafutul Felasife into Turkish. Inshallah, it will come out soon. And this one is Fususul Hikem. Shuaib talked about Winston Morris, who is one of the translators of Fususul Hikem by Ibn Arabi. And this one is Fususul Hikem, Sharhu Fususul Hikem. The most respectable and famous commentary on Ibn Sina's Fususul Hikem is Davud Kayseri's commentary. Davud Kayseri, I don't know if you are familiar with him. He is from Turkey also. Kayseri is a province in Turkey, and he is the first Ottoman mudarris, the first Ottoman professor, like 700 years ago or so. So I translated this book, Sharhu Fususul Hikem by Davud Kayseri, into Turkish to contribute to the better understanding of Ibn Arabi. This one is Ibn Arabi, the symbolism. Symbolism in Ibn Arabi. This is my PhD thesis. It was published in 2008, and now it's 5th or 6th print now. And this book is the Persian translation of my Ibn Arabi, the symbolism, my Turkish PhD. This is the Persian translation of my PhD. And this book was nominated for the year, for the award of the book of year in Iran 2 years earlier, but it did not earn the prize. And this book already you know. This is my book, Suhrawardi's Critique of Ibn Sīnā. This is my associate professorship thesis. Now these are my books. And this is the last one. I would like to introduce you this book. This book is very important. This is also translated into Arabic, and you can find it in the internet and download its Arabic translation. This is by also Ghulam Hussein Ibrahim Dinani. This is a history of Islamic philosophy from a different perspective. Dinani is he's a professor emeritus from Iran. He's around 90 years old. He's one of the most respected scholars and philosophers of Iran. I also met him, in 2007. He was such a humble person. He himself came to visit me, saying that because he's a guest, I should visit him. I should go over to him to see him because he's a guest. Although when I was there, I was younger than 30 years, and he was like 7 to 8 years old man, an old man he was. But in spite of this, he himself came over to visit me, to see me, because I was a guest from Turkey. This is 3 volumes, a history of Islamic philosophy. I, insistently advise to you to read it, at least in Arabic, if you don't translate it into Malay language. Now, I would like to start talking about the importance of today's topic, why I have studied this topic, and why this topic is important for the philosophical studies. Excuse me. As you know, Shihabuddin Suhrawardī, he was born in Iran, in Zanjan. In Gregorian calendar, he was born in 1155, and and he passed away in 1191. As a matter of fact, he was killed. He was, murdered by Salahuddin Ayyubi, the, Sultan of the Ayyubi state in the Middle East, in the Syria at that time in the 12th century. And there are different explanations and accounts of why he was killed by Salahuddin Ayyubi. But we know that he was killed because of the scholars of Sham complained about him and informed against him, saying that he is a Shi'i agent, or he is a heterodox, he is a zindiq, he is a kafir. And then Salahuddin Ayyubi had to kill him. And there are different sayings how he was killed. Some say that he was executed, or he was beheaded. Some others says he was let to die, because of they did not give him food, so he died to like this. Suhrawardī, as you know, in Islamic philosophical tradition, we have two major schools or trends of philosophy. One is Masha'iyya, the other one is Ishraqiyya. Masha'i, as you know, it means peripateticism. It is the literal translation of Aristotelian philosophy, peripateticism. As you know, Aristotle was not from Athens. He was not the native of Athens. So when he was at his professor's Platon's academy, and then he left the academy because he was not a native of Athens. He had no right to buy a property, a building, to do his classes. So he had to teach on a garden when he was walking. It was like a recreation park where he was teaching at the same time he was walking. So they said that his school was called Masha'iyya or Peripatetic because they were walking, and in Greek Peripatetic means walking. But we know that not only this naming, there's another explanation of this naming. That place, the name of that place was also walking place, and so they were related or attributed or affiliated to the walking place. Peripatos is a walking place, and people who are affiliated to or related to that place. So it's like Ashabu Sufa in Islamic history. Sufa is a place, it's like a camellia, the young and male single companions of the Prophet were living there. Ashabu Sufa, the members of that place. It is the same in peripatetics because they are related to that place, the walking place. So they are called peripatetic. When we look at Masha'iyya, it's the same. Masha is a superlative form. Ism tafdil. Ism tafdil, but does not mean only ism fa'il. It means also ism mekan and ism alat, as I think you also call it the same in Malay language, right? Ism alat and ism mekan. It's the same in Arabic. Ism al-makan or ism al-ala. So, for instance, sajjada or sabaha is not someone who is making a lot of prostration or sajda. Sajjada means the rug, you are praying on it. So سجادة, though it is a superlative form, it's called or مبالغة اسم فاعل. We call it اسم فاعل with مبالغة, exaggerated form of اسم فاعل. So it means a place, you know. مشى means walking place in short. مشائي يا النسبة, يا النسبة means peripatetic, you know, those who are related to the walking place. Al-ta, in the end, it means the group, you know, like Sufiya. Al-ta al-marbuta, they call it. Al-ta al-marbuta, it means, you know, it refers to the group. So al-masha'iyya, al-ta al-marbuta, in this context means the peripatetics, al-masha'iyun. But al-ta al-marbuta at the same time means المصدر الجعلي أو الصنعي, يعني artificial مصدر. So Tahir peripatetism, you know, مشائية, التاء المربوطة here means peripateticism. When we look at peripateticism and its or مشائية, it's not, it means, okay, Aristotelianism, but it is not only Aristotle's ideas or philosophical views, because when the philosophical works of Aristotle were translated into Arabic, they were not translated as Aristotelian purely. On the contrary, you know, Aristotle's works were worked out and commentated by such Aristotelian scholars like Iskender or Alexander of Aphrodisias and or Al-Iskandar al-Aphrodisi, Iskandar al-Aphrodisi in Arabic, or like Neoplatonist scholars like Proclus and Porphyrius. So when Aristotle's books and corpus were translated into Arabic, they were translated in a Neoplatonic color and interpretation. So when we say Meshai, it doesn't mean that it is, you know, Aristotelian purely. On the contrary, it is Neoplatonistic Aristotelianism. We can say that it was Neoplatonistic Aristotelianism. If we characterize or if we describe the major elements and features of this Masha'iyya, we can say that, you know, in three major areas: epistemology and logics first, and then in physics, and then in metaphysics. There are 6 or 7 major components of Masha'iyya. Number 1, in epistemology and logics, the salient feature or characteristic of Masha'iyya in logic or in epistemology is the adoption of Aristotelian theory of definition. Aristotelian theory of definition. In physics, it is the adoption of helomorphism, which means matter and form. The bodies, the corporeal things, the bodies are composed of 2 substances, matter and or hayl and form, al-madda was-sura. And the rejection of atomism, al-jawhar al-fard, or al-juz la yatajazza. You know, this al-juz la yatajazza, atomism, has been rejected, and this rejection is a major characteristic of Aristotelian Mashai philosophy. In metaphysics, we see the adoption of the distinction between quiddity or essence and existence. The distinction between essence and existence is a major characteristic of Mashai philosophy. And then the adoption of Neoplatonistic theory of emanation, sudur, nadariyat sudur, أو failed, this was also Mashai. And then number 3 in metaphysics, rejection of the Platonic forms or ideas. Number 4 is the adoption of God's pre-existential, universal, and creative mode of knowledge. How is God's knowledge in how God knows in Mashai philosophy? So we say that God's knowledge is ilm, is awali, pre-existential. Yani God knew the things before they existed, before they came into existence. God's knowledge is universal, general, not particular, and God's knowledge is creative. Number 5 in metaphysics, the belief of reincarnation, tanasukh, this is, they rejected, the rejection of tanasukh. So if we count them, there are 7 items or 7 major characteristics of Mashai philosophy, 1 in epistemology, 1 in physics, and 5 in metaphysics. When we look at, this is Mashaiya. We talk about its etymology, we talk about its history a bit, saying that Mashaiya is not only Aristotelianism, but also it is Neoplatonism. And we listed 7 major characteristics of the Mashaiya. If you look at the Ishraqi school on the other side, we see Suhrawardī. He is the founder of this school. In Mashaiya, Aristotle and Ibn Sīnā, we can say. Here in Mashaiya, we see Suhrawardī. Suhrawardī is the founder of this school. But first, we want to analyze the term al-Ishraqiyya etymologically. So what is the source of this derivation? There are different kinds of explanations. One is, related to the Orientalism, al-Sharq, because as you know, in Arabic, Mashriq means, al-Mashriq means the East or the Orient. So they say that Suhrawardī's al-Hikmah, Hikmatul Ishraq, yani the philosophy of Ishraq is the philosophy of the Orient or the Oriental philosophy. Why are they saying so? They say that because Suhrawardī located himself vis-a-vis the West. What is the West? They say that it is either the Greek philosophy, the Greek philosophers, or it is the Muslim West. So they locate Suhrawardī vis-a-vis the, Baghdadian in Baghdad, the philosophers in Baghdad, who are the followers of Farabi and Yahya bin Adi and other Aristotelian Muslim philosophers. So they say that because Suhrawardī was from Zanjan, from the east or eastern part of the Muslim world first, and he was Persian, and he tried to revivify the Persian wisdom. So they said that his philosophy, al-Ishraq, in his philosophy means Orientalism or Oriental philosophy. But when we look at the term Ishraq, this explanation is both etymologically and doctrinally, I think, wrong. Etymologically, it is wrong because al-ishraq from the ruba'i verb ashraqa yushriku ishraq, but al-mashriq is from sulasi, from trilateral, but al-ishraq it's four lateral. Yeah, and there are four letters in ashraqa yushriku ishraq in this qalib. But in al-mashriq it's sharaqa yashruku, it is sulasi, it is three lateral. So if we say it's al-mushriqiyya, it needs to be said mushriqiyya, not mashriqiyya. Al-hikmah al-mashriqiyya. But Suhrawardī doesn't say anything like al-hikmah al-mushriqiyya or al-mashriqiyya. So it is not related to al-mashriq or to the Orient. We also should say that Suhrawardī, okay, he is mentioning some old, ancient, previous Persian kings like Khosrow and Zoroaster as one of the pioneers and forerunners of his Ishraqi philosophy. But he not only mentions the ancient Persian previous kings, but also he mentions like Pythagoras and Socrates and Empedocles and Platon mostly. And so he is not only receiving and taken from the Persian, so to speak, from the Orient, but he also takes from the Western, from the Greek. And if you look at Suhrawardī's Ishraqi philosophy, we see that I did not see anything which has a philosophical importance and value that was related to old Persian tradition. When we look at Suhrawardī's critique of, Masha'iyya or Ibn Sīnā, we see that if Aristotle is the founder of Peripateticism and Masha'iyya, why Suhrawardī does not criticize Aristotle himself, and instead of Aristotle, he criticizes Ibn Sīnā? We see that in two contexts he mentions Aristotle, and he's talking about Aristotle in very high praising terms. He is calling Aristotle al-Muallim al-Awwal, the first teacher, like the other Muslim philosophers. And in second context, which is not as clear as the first one, he is referring to Aristotle as someone who accepts the failure to produce an essential definition, al-had. In the third context, there are three contexts, I said two. He is referring to Aristotle as the helper of souls and the leader of speculative or rationalist philosophers. So we see that Suhrawardī is mentioning Aristotle 3 times in his books, but he does not criticize openly Aristotle. And when we look at Suhrawardī's followers like Shahrazuri, his commentators, that's to say his commentators, they say that Suhrawardī because Suhrawardī has two images or two conceptions of Aristotle, two different Aristotle. One is the historical Aristotle as we know him, but the other one, he is trying to use, so to speak, Aristotle's charismatic personality to support his own philosophy, which means that he is trying to support his philosophy through Aristotle. So he doesn't want to get in clash with Aristotle openly, either because he believes that some elements of Aristotle's philosophy support his own philosophy, or he doesn't want to get in clash with Aristotle for political reasons, strategically. Why? Because Aristotle at the time was a very charismatic philosopher. Nobody wants to, wants to make people laugh at him by criticizing Aristotle as the authority of philosophy at himself. Yes. So we see that Suhrawardī is criticizing Ibn Sīnā as the representative of Aristotelian philosophy in his books. Excuse me. So we need to ask in this context why Suhrawardī is criticizing Mashayikh philosophy in general and Ibn Sīnā in particular. What is the reason for Suhrawardī's criticism of Ibn Sīnā as a philosopher, who is the most important philosopher ever, in Islamic tradition? Okay, there is Farabi, there is Ibn Rushd, there is Fahrettin Razi, Ghazali, etc. But as philosopher, when we look at the post-Ibn Sīnā period, we see that those who are studying philosophy per se through Ibn Sīnā's books. And if somebody wants to criticize philosophy, they are criticizing through Ibn Sīnā's books. If somebody wants to study Islamic philosophy, like the Sufis or theologians, they are studying this through Ibn Sīnā's books. Like Fahrettin Razi, he wrote a major commentary on Ibn Sīnā's Al-Isharat wa Tanbihat, as well as on his Uyun al-Hikmah. So, Suhrawardī is also criticizing Mashayikh philosophy through Ibn Sīnā's works. And now we are asking why Suhrawardī is criticizing Ibn Sīnā's philosophy. This is mostly related to Suhrawardī's conception of philosophy and philosophers. As you may know, Suhrawardī is dividing philosophy into two. He says that we have al-falsafa or al-hikmah al-dhawqiyya wal-hikmah al-bahthiyya. Al-hikmah al-dhawqiyya, Sayyid Nasr translates as al-dhawqiyya like sapiential. Sapience means to make taste of something. When you experience something, when you eat something, when you drink something, you take taste of it. Dhawq means taste. So, we can call it intuitional philosophy or experiential philosophy, but intuitional is more, I think, philosophical and technical. Al-hikmah al-bahthiyya, either rational, we can call it rational philosophy, or discursive philosophy, or speculative philosophy. But I think Suhrawardī means, as someone who translated Suhrawardī's Hikmatul Ishraq twice, once only the text of Hikmatul Ishraq, and then together with its commentary, Shahrazuri's commentary, Suhrawardī means with Bahthi, purely rational philosophy. So we can call it intuitional philosophy and rational philosophy. Suhrawardī so divides philosophy into rational philosophy and intuitional philosophy. According to this division, categorization, he categorizes philosophers into three groups. One is the philosopher who is well versed in both rational and intuitional philosophy. And second one, and this is the highest one, if someone is well versed in both rational and intuitional philosophy, he is the highest. He has the highest ranking. And the second one, the philosopher who is well versed only in intuitional philosophy. The third one is well versed only in rational philosophy. Suhrawardī says that the most perfect philosopher among these three groups is the one who is well versed in both rational and intuitional philosophy. He says that Platon, he puts himself and Platon in the first, the Muhaqqaq Sufis, or the enlightened, verified Sufis, in the second category, and the Mashayis in general, and Ibn Sīnā in particular, he puts them in the third category. Suhrawardī thinks that rational philosophy is not enough to get knowledge, to attain the knowledge of truth. Rational philosophy is not enough, is not sufficient to get the knowledge of truth. He says that he's talking about the about those who are well versed in intuition philosophy. So what is intuition philosophy? يعني الحكمة الذوقية. What is it? Suhrawardī says that if somebody makes self-mortification or the purification of oneself, his nafs, tazkiyatun nafs in Sufi terms, in mystical terms, if somebody does this, he will weaken his bodily aspect and will improve and strengthen his spiritual aspect, so he can disengage his soul, he can disengage his soul from his body, he can leave his body, and then he can make astral journey, and he can see the truth with his eye, and he calls this mushahada or kashf. Of course, these are Sufi and mystical terms, Islamic mystical terms, because Suhrawardī used these terms and elements in his philosophy, in his Hikmatul Ishraq. He was misinterpreted as a Sufi, not as a philosopher in the beginning. Suhrawardī says that he himself experienced a Sufi, a mystical state. He had a mystical experience, and then he was a Mashai, he became an Ishraqi after his own vision. And he says that Hermes, in the history of philosophy, Hermes, Platon, Zoroaster, and the king Khosrow, Iranian Persian priest Khosrow also lived the same experience. He himself, Suhrawardī, also lived a similar experience, and he composed his Hikmatul Ishraq, his magnum opus, after such an experience. Azan of Asr is being called now. Azizallah Shifat Ya Rasulullah. Okay, Suhrawardī says that rational philosophy is not enough to reach the knowledge of truth. So why he thinks that we need also rational philosophy? Why intuitional philosophy is not enough? Suhrawardī is making an analogy in this context, saying that, okay, there is an observation in astronomical sciences, but observation is not enough to build a science with the name of astronomy. We need also theory. So he says that we have a mystical vision, but we need to build a theory for this vision. We see why we still did not answer the question why Suhrawardī criticized the Mashai views, Mashai philosophy. Because his philosophy is in clash with Mashai philosophy. He is trying to build a philosophy because he says that Mashai philosophy is not enough, is not sufficient to reach the truth. So he is bringing a new philosophy, and this philosophy has a complicated and multifaceted relationship with Mashai philosophy. He is criticizing Mashai philosophy, unlike Ghazali. When Ghazali is criticizing, he is trying to do away with the Mashai philosophy. But Suhrawardī is trying to modify the Mashai philosophy into a new philosophy. He is trying to carve out a new philosophy of the Mashai philosophy. So he says that Mashai philosophy is not enough to reach the truth, and we need to add some elements and incorporate into this philosophy, into Mashai philosophy, and we make it perfect. And this perfection will come out with what? With mystical experience, observation. So his philosophy, Suhrawardī's philosophy, is in clash with Mashai philosophy, and we see there are some major points in which Suhrawardī's understanding is in clash with Ibn Sīnā's understanding. One of these is the theory of definitions. As you know, in logics, there are two kinds of knowledge: at-tasawwur wa at-tasdiq. At-tasawwur means conceptual knowledge, and tasdiq means a propositional knowledge, at-tasdiq. So conceptual knowledge is attained with definition, and it's different kinds of definitions, either had or rasm or ism. Had, as you know, is an essential definition. Suhrawardī says that the Mashai theory of definition claims that we can know something even if we don't see it. Even if we don't see something, we can have an essential knowledge of it. And Mashai theory of definition relies on this topic, on this point. And Suhrawardī rejects this idea, rejects this notion. He says that we cannot know something unless we see it. We need to have a direct, immediate vision of it. As you know, in Mashai theory of definitions, we have had definition, essential definition, and it consists of a genus and differentia. يعني الجنس والفصل. Genus and differentia. Okay, genus, Suhrawardī calls it general part, and he calls, or he refers to the fasl as الجزء الخاص, يعني special part. He says that in a species, let's say human being is a rational animal. Animal is its genus and rational is its differentia. So differentia is its special part. Suhrawardī says that if this special part, if we know this special part, we know this species. If we know the rational, what rational means, we know also human being. But if somebody does not know human being, he doesn't know rational. Why? Because the rational is special to human being. It exists only in human being. So if it exists in something else, someone else, so it will not be special. So Suhrawardī says that, the Meshai theory of definition is stuck. It doesn't lead us anywhere, and it doesn't give the truth of things. So what should we do? Suhrawardī says that we need to see the thing itself. We need to have a direct vision of it, and then we can refer to it with a name. And Suhrawardī calls his own theory of definition nominal definition, or the definition of naming. When we look at that is Suhrawardī's, why Suhrawardī is saying like this? Because Suhrawardī is underlining and accentuating the role of vision and direct perception, visual perception in knowledge. He says that we cannot know unless we see, unless we perceive. And then we see helomorphism or madde suret, the hyle and form, or matter and form theory. Suhrawardī, as you know, in Meshai physics, the bodies consist of, or composed of, matter and form. Suhrawardī says that we don't see a body, a thing, as two, matter and form. On the contrary, we see it as one thing, as one integral, complete thing, not as matter on one side and form on the other side. So our vision shows that it is one thing, not two things. And Suhrawardī, of course, he in his Hikmatul Ishraq giving a very in-depth critique of Aristotelian helomorphism in that book, in my book, in this one, as you see, Suhrawardī's criticism of the philosophy of Sīnā. These are in detail presented. We see varlık, existence and essence, the distinction between essence and existence in possible things. In possible things, as you know, al-ashya fil ashya al-mumkina, the philosophers say that the essence al-mahiyya and al-wujud, existence, are two different parts, and essence does not require existence. On the contrary, existence came over or came on the mahiyya, on essence, later on. So in God, as the necessary being, essence and existence is the same thing. Suhrawardī does not accept this duality in metaphysics too. He rejects it in physics, the duality or dualism of matter and form. He rejects the same dualism in metaphysics. He does not accept the distinction between essence and existence. So he does not accept the demonstration of the existence of God as the necessary being on this distinction. Another topic in which Suhrawardī criticizes, Aristotelian and Ibn Sīn Avicennan philosophy is related to the theory of Platonic forms. Suhrawardī is criticizing in this context the arguments that have been produced by Aristotle himself and Ibn Sīna to refute the existence of ideas or the Platonic forms. Suhrawardī, is the last topic I would like to touch is the modality of God's knowledge and action. As you know, in the Messiah understanding of God's knowledge, God knows everything before their existence, and God's knowledge is creative and active, which means that God knows things before the things existent, and his knowledge, God's knowledge, brings the things into existence and not vice versa. For instance, our human knowledge relies on the existence of things, but God's knowledge is vice versa. His knowledge does not rely on the things. On the contrary, the existence of things is derived from God's knowledge. Suhrawardī does not accept this. He says that, he says that God's knowledge is reduced to God's immaterial nature, but immateriality is something negative, but knowledge is something positive, and something positive like knowledge cannot be reduced to something negative like abstraction or immateriality. So he says that God's knowledge, we need to reduce God's knowledge to something positive, which is light. He says that God is the light of lights. So he's establishing a relationship between perception and between light. If something is self-evident, it can perceive itself. So if something perceives itself, it perceives other things, because God's pre-existential knowledge cannot be reduced, in short, to his abstraction. And the last one is tenasukh, reincarnation. Messiah philosophers, Aristotle first and then Ibn Sīna, they criticize and reject reincarnation. But Ibn Sīna, what Suhrawardī does, Suhrawardī is he's ambivalent, We cannot decide if Suhrawardī is adopting reincarnation or not. But Suhrawardī says that the Messiah argumentation against this doctrine is not good enough to establish the impossibility of tenasukh. Yes, sir. I came to the end of my lecture, and we can say that Suhrawardī criticized Ibn Sina's philosophy for two reasons. First, he says that Ibn Sina's philosophy or Mashai rational philosophy is not enough to lead us to the knowledge of truth. This is number one. And number two, Suhrawardī's own philosophy, his Ishraqi philosophy, is in clash, in conflict with the Mashai philosophy. Either because the Mashai philosophers like Aristotle or Ibn Sina criticize the views which Suhrawardī himself adopts, or directly Suhrawardī criticizes the Mashai views. Okay, sir, I've completed my lecture now. You may ask your questions, or you may make comments, or if you like to say something, please go ahead. Schweib, are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just came back from the toilet actually. So Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Professor Tahir Uluc, for your amazing lectures on the criticism of Suhrawardī on Ibn Sina. So as we promised, we'll be opening Q&A session for the audiences to ask any related or relevant questions on the topic that has been lectured on by Professor Tahir Uluc. So everyone is invited to ask your questions. Do ask and grab this opportunity to ask, inshallah. Okay, we have the first question here from Musa Yusuf Owoyemi. I think that the issue between Ibn Sina and Suhrawardī is basically that of method. While Ibn Sina was careful to remain on the path of rational understanding of things, Suhrawardī was willing to overlook the difference between the philosophical method of rational understanding of things and the Sufi method of experiential knowledge. Maybe, Prof, you can respond to this, inshallah.
Yes, there's a difference between Suhrawardī's and Ibn Sina's method, but if we say that Suhrawardī's method is mystical vision, or if we describe Suhrawardī's method purely as vision or visionary, we do not give him full justice. Why? Because Suhrawardī says that observation is important, not only in metaphysical matters but also in physical matters. For instance, he is rejecting Aristotelian theory of definition because this theory claims that we can produce the conception of something even if we don't see it. Even if we don't see something directly, we can produce and create its image in our mind, departing from the things that we have seen directly. Suhrawardī do not accept this, and Suhrawardī is, I think, in the medieval ages, rationalism. What is the reasoning? What is the think? Ibn Sina says that الفكر انتقال الذهن من المعلومات إلى المجهول، يعني انتقال الذهن أو حركة الذهن. يعني if we don't have the I don't know how to express the his hissi knowledge, the sense knowledge. If we don't have sense knowledge, we cannot think. Suhrawardī says that first we need to know something directly. So he is trying to, complement. He is trying to, make perfect Ibn Sina's rational philosophy with his, let's say, experiential philosophy. But this experience is not only mystical experience. This is also a physical observation also. He is focus, he is, attaching importance or pulling attention to this observational science side of knowledge. This is what I will say now. Thank you for this question.
Thank you, Prof. Tahir.
Excuse me, may I ask the audience if any of them had any chance to take a look at this book? Have you seen any of you? Did you read any part of this book?
Yeah, if any of the audiences have read Prof. Tahir Uluc book, please do give a response. Maybe some comments or criticism of his book also. Prof, can we continue with the Q&A session, inshallah? Yeah, I think we have here some questions, also including private questions that have been sent to me. Here from Nuruddin, he asks, Prof, does Suhrawardi's criticism of Ibn Sina have parallels with Ghazali's criticism?
As I said at the beginning of my lecture, I said that I translated Ghazali's Tahafutul Falasifa, the incoherence of philosophers, into Turkish also. So, in fact, I forgot to make that point. I can say that Suhrawardi's philosophy of Ishraqiyya is, in fact, hugely influenced by Ghazali's critique of the philosophers. Because when Ghazali criticizes philosophers, he is at the same time suggesting some solutions, to the problems. So Suhrawardi took Ghazali's criticism of philosophers very seriously. For instance, this is I am thinking to write a monograph on this topic. For instance, Ghazali said that, criticized philosophers, saying that the God's knowledge is in the philosophical thought, God's knowledge is universal and not particular. And Suhrawardi tried to complement this topic by saying that God's knowledge is not only universal but also particular, by saying that God is the light of lights. So Suhrawardi's the relationship between Suhrawardi's criticism of philosophers and Ghazali's criticism of philosophers is more than parallelism. Suhrawardi, on the contrary, Suhrawardi, in short, if I summarize, Suhrawardi is, hugely influenced by Ghazali's criticism. But the difference between Ghazali and Suhrawardi, when Ghazali, as you know, he declared that the philosophers are, unbeliever at the end of his book. In fact, he is criticizing philosophers and he is, exposing the incoherences and contradictions of philosophers, and then he says they are kafirs. So, this is not the way to declare someone's kufr. Yani, he is exposing someone's contradictions and then he says he is kafir. You don't need to, put out his contradictions to declare that he is kafir. You need to put, the points that someone is in conflict with the pillars of a religion, its teachings, and then you can say he is Muslim or non-Muslim. But Suhrawardi is like, he's using, in fact, Mashai philosophy as a foundation for his own philosophy. And he says that, for instance, he wrote 3 major philosophical works: كتاب التلويحات, المشاعر والمطارحات, And then as a third book, his Hikmatul Ishraq. His magnum opus is Hikmatul Ishraq. And he says that if somebody wants to understand Hikmatul Ishraq very well, he needs to read first these two books, Kitab al-Talwihat and Al-Mashari wal-Mutarahat. Why? Because, he explained Mashai philosophy in these two books. So in these two books are like Ghazali's Maqasid al-Falasifa and his Mi'yar al-Ulum. He wrote Maqasid al-Falasifa first to describe what the views of philosophers, and then he criticized them. And Suhrawardī also did the same. He wrote Kitab al-Talwihat and Al-Mashari wal-Matarahat. He explained the Mashai philosophy in these two books, and then he criticized in his Hikmatul Ishraq. Hikmatul Ishraq has two chapters, in general. In the first chapter, he is criticizing the Mashai philosophy, and in the second chapter, which he calls the, Ilm al-Anwar, the science of light, he's, laying down his own Ishraqi philosophy. Thank you.
Right, inshallah, we'll be moving on to another question. Here is privately sent to me in the chat from Reza. He asks, does Suhrawardī provide any educational thoughts in his Al-Ishraqi? If yes, what are they?
May you read it again? I could not get it well.
Okay, I will read it again. Does Suhrawardī provide any educational thoughts or educational philosophy in his Kitab Al-Ishraqi? If yes, what are they?
As much as I remember, he's saying that if somebody wants to understand Hikmatul Ishraq very well, okay, he should not eat meat for 40 days. He should not eat meat, for 40 days first. This chila, arba'un, this in Sufism, right? He needs to do a self-mortification or a spiritual exercise for 40 days. And then what other he says, I need to think about it. It did not come to my mind right now. But he himself trained himself very, very hard. Suhrawardī, it's very difficult to understand Ibn Sina's points and then bring out his weak points. Suhrawardī is, I can say that, great scholar, a great philosopher, and his Hikmatul Ishraq has not been well, I think, appreciated. I'm saying this, there's a Western scholar, if I don't misremember his name, John Walbridge. He says that Suhrawardī criticized the rational philosophy, and he tried to open, an experimental or experiential philosophy. But then there came out mysticism. But in the West, the philosophers like the Bacon, the Francis Bacon, he also criticized Aristotle, and then they wrote British, English experimental philosophy. So, Suhrawardī is like this. He knew very well the weak points and loopholes of Aristotelian philosophy. But then, what is his alternative? His alternative is not an experimental, new age philosophy. His alternative is mysticism. So if we compare mysticism and rational philosophy from a modern, of course, point of view, we will say if Suhrawardī's critique of Aristotelian philosophy is a regression, or progression. Is it regress or progress? You can make your own decision. Thank you for this question also.
Right. We move. Okay, we move on into another question by Nuruddin here. Prof, does the book Alamul Huda have anything to do with Suhrawardi's philosophy in general?
You know, Alamul Huda wa Aqidatu Arbab al-Tuqa, I think he means that book is, there are two Suhrawardis, as you know. Shihabuddin Suhrawardi, they are both Shihabuddin Suhrawardi. But this one is, they call this one Suhrawardi al-Maqtul. This one is Sufi, philosopher, Suhrawardi the philosopher. The other one is Suhrawardi, he died in 632 Hijri, in Hijri calendar. I think 1240, something like this. You know, he passed away some 70 years after Suhrawardi. So A'lamul Huda wa Aqidatu Arbab al-Tuqa is written by the Sufi Suhrawardi, the other, you know, the writer, the author of Awarif al-Ma'arif. You know him, right? The author of Awarif al-Ma'arif is the author of A'lam al-Huda. And I am not sure how the, this person came across this book, because I myself edited and translated that A'lam al-Huda wa Aqidat Arbab al-Tuqa into English, and I published it a couple of years earlier in Lebanon. It's not related to the philosopher Suhrawardi. It is written by the Suhrawardi Sufi, the author of Awarif al-Ma'arif. But the relation is that I translated both books or both texts. Another question, Shuaib?
Okay. Here from Hazim Shah. So far, you have not mentioned Suhrawardi's ontology of light, which is fundamental to his metaphysics and which also differentiates him from Aristotle. Can you comment on this?
Yes, because I focused on Suhrawardi's critique of Ibn Sīnā, and actually it was there, but I could not mention all of them during that time. So I can say that light in Suhrawardi's philosophy, in his ontology, some people say that light is like existence in Ibn Sina's philosophy. But I think that light is not existence in Suhrawardi's. It is not the equal of existence, or it is not the, I don't know how to say, the alternative of existence or wujud in Suhrawardi's philosophy. Light in Suhrawardi's philosophy, I think, is that mostly related to epistemology. Because light, what is the characteristic of light? It's evidency. It's because light is like, it's very clear, it's very evident. So light is related to self-evidency first in epistemology. Second, in Suhrawardi's epistemology, light is related to perception also. When we look at the Nur al-Anwar, the light of lights, God is light of lights first. So it is the source of perception, it is the source of knowledge, it is the source of liveliness. Al-Hayy, God is Al-Hayy, and Al-Alim. In Suhrawardi's understanding, light is the source of liveliness or livingness and perception. As we said in Ibn Sina's system, Ibn Sina says that God knows himself because God is mujarrad. God is abstract, God is immaterial. Suhrawardī says that God's knowledge cannot be reduced to his abstraction, because abstraction is something negative, but knowledge is something positive, and something positive cannot be reduced to something negative. So he says that light is, perception, source of perception, source of, awareness, source of liveliness, and the human being is also human, and the al-uqul al-ashara, 10 intelligences, immaterial intelligences, they are also light in Suhrawardī's system. But Suhrawardī says that there are two kinds of lights. One is accidental, arid, and nur al-arid, and the other one is substantial, which means that there are some substances which are lights. God is light, 10 intelligences are light. Human soul is light also. So Suhrawardī says that we are aware and we are conscious, and our consciousness, Suhrawardī relies our consciousness on being light. So ontology, if we say Suhrawardī's ontology, is it related to light? I don't think that Suhrawardī's ontology can be reduced to light. In Suhrawardī's system, there is no, there is no vijud, like in, Ibn Sīna's system or Ibn Arabi's system or in Mullah Sadra's system. Suhrawardī says that we only have the things as one thing, as single thing, but in the duality of essence and existence, and then there is a duality of, or dualism of matter and form. So in Suhrawardī's system, we cannot equalize light with existence. This is what I will say.
All right, inshallah, we'll be receiving 3 more questions here. Actually, there are many questions, but for the conveniences of all audiences and also including you, Prof. Tahir Uluc, I will be receiving only 3 more. One from Nuruddin, one from Muhammad Nur Azri, and also one from Reza, inshallah. So from Nuruddin, I will be choosing here. Prof, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote Maturidi's criticism of the philosopher Suhrawardī. Is his critique similar to that Ghazali from the Ash'ari tradition, or is there a difference?
Maturidi criticized philosophers mostly on, the ontological nature of the world, if it is hadith or it is qadim. And Imam Maturidi says that he is talking about the Dahris, atheists, philosophers, and he's talking about the Neoplatonist, emanationist philosophers, and then he talks about Aristotelian helomorphism, and then he talks about his own kind of creation, and then he's criticizing the Neoplatonist Sudur theory, but he does not declare them to be kafir, unlike Ghazali. He says that they used to be in Tawheed first in the beginning, and then they moved away from Tawheed. For instance, he says that Aristotle attributed the qualities or the attributes of God to matter. And he says that Aristotle took the attributes of God from the Muwahidin, in his time, and then he related or attributed these attributes, these awsaf, these sifat, to al-madda, to matter. So he is criticizing, Maturidi, the, either Aristotelian or Neoplatonist who say that, or who claim that the world was qadim, or eternal, because in hudus, the because the kalami or theological demonstration of God rely on the creation of the world. They say that first we need to establish the created nature of the world, and then we will establish the existence of the creator. Now, from the created to the creator. Therefore, Maturidi criticizes the philosophers who say that the world is eternal. In this respect, Maturidi's critique of philosophers is similar to Ghazali, but as you may know, Maturidi lived 150 years earlier than Ghazali, before Ghazali. So, when people say that Ghazali is the first, or Ghazali himself even claims that he is the first in terms of criticizing philosophers in this topic, but we see that Maturidi is far before Ghazali, and his arguments are also very refined and very subtle.
Inshallah, very.
Maturidi's but language is softer than Ghazali. Ghazali is cursing at philosophers. Maturidi is not like this. And he doesn't say they are kafir. Maybe because, but Maturidi is very angry with the Mu'tazila. Ghazali is angry with the philosophers because at his time he sees the philosophers as posing danger, to the Muslim orthodoxy. And Maturidi criticized the Mu'tazila, very toughly and very heavily, because he thought that the Mu'tazila is posing danger to, or risk or danger to, the Muslim orthodoxy. So their time is different. But what is more interesting is that what Maturidi is adopting as related to the ontological nature of the world was seen by Ghazali as unorthodoxy or as kufr. Because Maturidi says that God created the world. Please pay attention to this, to my words. Maturidi says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world in eternity. Fil qidam, fil azal. But the creative act occurred in eternity, but the world came into existence later on. The action is eternal. In Maturidi's system, Maturidi says that God's attribute or takween is eternal, which means that God created the world in eternity, fil azal. But the world came into existence later on. The creation, the creative act is eternal, but the origination of the world is, how to say, hadith. So Ghazali says that, there is a huge conflict between the Maturidis and Ash'aris in this topic. I would like to make this last comment. Theologians are trying to find a point to declare certain group to be kafir. What Maturidi says is kufr from Ghazali's perspective. Maturidi is the founder of a Sunni school, right? If he is the founder of a Sunni school, why one of his specific views was regarded as kufr by Ghazali? Because it was, it was useful for him to declare the philosophers as kafir. So it's mainly and intentional. It depends if it serves their intention. I mean, the theologians, they use it. They don't let it go. Thank you for this question.
Right. Thank you, Prof. It's very interesting answer and very interesting question. Next question by Muhammad Nur Azri. Professor, my question may be off topic but related about philosophy. Our prophet come when philosophy already there. But why our prophet do not use philosophical term or methodologies when preaching Islam?
Yani, I don't know what he understands from the philosophical matter, but when we look at the Quran, we see that the Quran used that method. We know that God says that, you know, إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. واختلاف الليل والنهار. What is the point, in this, the alternation of days and nights? واختلاف الليل والنهار. And the alternation or the differentiation or the variation of, but alternation is the best translation, I think. How this ayah makes, demonstrates the existence of God. This is an Aristotelian physics, brother. Why? Because when Maturidi uses this in his Kitab al-Tawhid, if there was no alternation, let's say if it was night all the time, or if it was day all the time, without alternation, it would be a natural movement. Maturidi says there is a الحركة الإرادية والحركة الطبيعية. الحركة الطبيعية happens in one way only. So if it were only day or if it were only night, somebody could say that it is natural movement. So there is no need for the mudabbir of alam, mudabbir of the world. But it is different, it alternates between two. So the Prophet or the Quran, used the philosophical method. I think we can bring a lot of examples from the Quran. And I think, image and our image of the Prophet, I think, is also a bit need to be, rectified, because we say that the Prophet was illiterate even after he became a prophet. Why are we saying this? Yes, it happens in the Quran as ummi, but ummi in Arabic means Gentile, the word Gentile in English, it means that not Christian, sorry, not Jewish, which means did not read the scriptures. The Prophet did not read the scriptures. Ummi in this context means this. So the Prophet did use the philosophical method, and we see the same philosophical method in the Quran itself also, because it invites us to think about the natural phenomena, the creation of the world, and many theological arguments and proofs were built on the Quranic method. So we cannot say that the Prophet used only the khitabi, you know that, right? Al-khatabi, wal-jadali, wal-burhani. The Prophet used both khatabi and jadali and burhani methods. We know that. Ibn Rushd wrote a major work on this, right? His Faslul Maqal. I myself did not translate, but I've been teaching Ibn Rushd's Faslul Maqal. I would advise this brother to refer to Ibn Rushd's Faslul Maqal. It is very important text for all the Muslims, we need to read it and we need to read it very carefully. Thank you for this question also.
All right, inshallah, I think this will be the last question. This question has been posted to me in the private chat there from Reza. He asks, Prof, do you have any suggestions on research that can be conducted on Suhrawardī's philosophy of education, particularly on Islamic education? I think this is a continuation of his question just now.
He can contact me with my email. Let me think about it. Let me refer to my works and writings, and let me, investigate and examine my works with this perspective. And he can contact me with my email, and we can discuss this issue with him. Now it did not come to my mind specifically. Sorry, I am sorry.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof. Tahir Uluc, for your amazing answers given to all the questions that have been given today. And I believe the audiences really enjoyed your lecture, and they have been responding well through their questions here. Alhamdulillah. For Tradisi, we would like to thank you, Professor Tahir Uluc, for your willingness to be with us tonight in Malaysia tonight. In Turkey, I think it's currently evening, right?
It's now 5:42 in Turkey. We just passed Waqt al-Asr.
I see.
And now we are approaching evening, but it is not evening. It is, I don't know if you can see from my window.
Yeah, I can see clearly there.
It's still daytime, here.
Yeah, currently in Malaysia we are 10:42 p.m. It's already night. Yeah, approaching midnight actually. We have also passed Isha time. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, thank you. I am very happy and glad to be with you and to meet you, to talk to you and share my scholarship. And there's actually one more question here. Suhrawardī's position on reincarnation. I read the Walbridge's work here. He stated that Mullah Sadra stated Suhrawardī rejected reincarnation. However, Qutb Shira stated that in fact Suhrawardī believed in it, but only his beliefs. Do you have any comments on different Suhrawardī's beliefs? Yeah, Suhrawardī is ambivalent. It's not, his position is not clear about this. He just criticized the Mashai, the peripatetic argumentation against the reincarnation. He's like, he adopted, but he says that the reincarnation, to establish or to demonstrate reincarnation, we don't have enough proofs either. He says that both sides have equally weak, their proofs are equally weak. This is the term he says. So he says Mashai rejection is also weak, and he says that the Ishraqi, because as you know, Aristotle criticized and rejected reincarnation, but Platon adopted this, and so Suhrawardī is a bit inclined to this belief because Platon is his ideal philosopher, because Aristotle rejected and criticized Platon on this issue. Suhrawardī is trying to defend his ideal philosopher Platon against Aristotle. That's why I think, otherwise, let me tell something important. In Suhrawardī's own cosmology, in fact, he should also reject reincarnation. Why? Because in his philosophy, he has the term, the lords of idols, or Rabbul Anwa', or Rabbul Tilsim, or Rabbul Haykal, like this. So if every species species like cats and dogs and trees. Every species has uh, an idea, I would say, the Platonic idea, or his in his terminology, Rabbul Haykel. So from one animal to another animal, there cannot be a, a movement like this. They cannot, you know, immigrate from one to another, because every species has its own soul, because he says, you know, there's an idea. So Suhrawardi's own, I will say, his own cosmology does not allow for reincarnation, but he is defending reincarnation, I think, because Aristotle rejected and criticized, and reincarnation was adopted by Plato, and Plato is a major figure in Suhrawardi's philosophy. Thank you again. It is my pleasure. Inshallah, we one day come together face to face
Inshallah.
and continue with this fruitful conversation.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah. I think this is also somewhat new to the Malaysian people, Malaysian audiences, including me myself, because in Malaysia, the Ghazalian tradition is very strong in its philosophical sense, and also we also have Ibn Arabi's influence to the philosophy, to the Islamic philosophy in Malaysia, and Suhrawardī is somewhat new to the Malaysian people, I believe. So for the audiences tonight, I believe they have received insightful knowledge on Suhrawardī. If not insightful, they have been introduced to the Suhrawardī. Actually, this is for the special lecture. This is the second topic on Suhrawardī. Before this, we invite Mahdi Amin Razavi to talk about philosophy of Suhrawardī in general. Alhamdulillah for the willingness of the audiences to stay with us tonight. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much. And me, myself, Muhammad Shu'aib, the representative of Tradisi, I would like to say sorry to all the audiences, and particularly to Prof. Tahir Uluc, in case there are many mistakes, in case there are shortcomings from us. Thank you, everyone. And I would like to postpone with wabillahi taufiq wa hidayah. Wassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, everyone. We can rewatch the recording later on, inshallah.
Alaikum salam.